Have you heard of homeopathy? Homeopathy, the philosophy of homeopathy is that like cures like. But could there be something in your home or in your surrounding area that will help you with anything that is going on? Today, we're very fortunate to be speaking to not only a practitioner in homeopathy or that has a doctorate degree in homeopathy, but also a radio show host that he's been in the classroom many times in the past, but it's been a while since we've connected. But I'm glad that Robert Scott Bell is here in the classroom and he's going to teach us what we could have in our homeopathic toolkit for our home or when we're out and about. And so go get your pad, your pencil, paper, whatever it is, so you can take lots of notes, or you can share this with your friends and relive it over and over again so that you can see that you have the power to heal your body. Hi, my name is Lily McDermott, and I am a certified life coach and the host of the Lillian McDermott radio show. If this is your first time joining in, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide natural ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you will embrace some new truths and embrace the fact that you can choose the life of your dreams. As I mentioned, there are so many different twists and turns or different things that when you look at homeopathy, what you can gain from it. But we're going to specifically or start with, and if we can expand later on, we can expand that there's more than herbs that we can look at. And I am really grateful because it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge. And I'm grateful that Robert Scott Bell is in the classroom. Welcome back, Robert. It's so nice to see you.
Lillian, it's great to see you as well, and I'm so glad you're doing so wonderful and looking and beaming that healing energy, which is what you've always done. So I
Oh,
appreciate
thank
that
you.
very
Right back
much.
at you. You must be looking in a mirror. So let's talk about homeopathy because the your background, I don't know if it's always been focused on that, but share a little bit what led you to want to get this doctorate to become a practitioner and now radio and all the things that you're doing to heal the world.
Well, I was raised pharmaceutically and medically, so I didn't know of homeopathy till I was 24 years of age, and it's what saved my life, turned my life around back to health after chronic diseases for 24 years due to nutrient deficiencies, toxicological burdens, medications all the time. I was raised again medically, so I was on the antibiotic of the week club, all of that. So I was a mess. But for a better future, I had always had a desire to be a doctor, but I only had a model for doctoring in the medical profession, the pharmaceutical field. And my uncle was a medical doctor, and weirdly enough, he warned me against becoming a doctor. My uncle, the doctor, said, "You don't want to become a doctor." I was like, "Uncle Bob, what are you talking about? It's all I ever wanted." He said, "You'll be miserable if you do it." And here's why. He laid out all of these things, and I still was not dissuaded until I went to Emory University in Atlanta on the pre-med track and realized, 18, 19 years into this thing, that these doctors are doing horrible poisonings to me. I've gotten, shots, I've got surgeries, I've had drugs and drugs and drugs. If I were to do that to other people as a means of my living, I would be miserable. My uncle was right. He knew my spirit. So it was a 4 or 5 years later that I met a homeopathic doctor, began to study with him, and within a couple of weeks of starting the homeopathic remedies, working on liver drainage formulas primarily to detoxify my body, I was having experiences, overcoming things so rapidly that no drug could do without numerous side effects that were just horrible. And so it turned me my course to say, oh my gosh, that thing I wanted to do and be the healer, I now have a method where I can do that. And I'm not harming anybody, and it doesn't degrade me. In fact, this is a joyful experience, even though I'll acknowledge that it wasn't easy. There were times where I was miserable in the recovery process because I was so toxic and deficient. But it led me to, again, that empowering methodology within homeopathy and natural medicine, that I could bring the power to heal back where it belongs with each and every one of you, like it was being brought back to me. So that was the short version of my journey. And now I'm 30 years into homeopathy, 25 years into broadcasting, and I haven't tired of it yet.
and you are going strong. You are amazing. You're an inspiration to achieve. So here we are talking about homeopathy. A lot of people don't understand that and that philosophy of homeopathy. And I remember listening to, is it Doug Kaufman? He was saying, likes cures like. So what is that philosophy? And help us understand what like cures like.
Well, I would say it's a bioenergetic resonance or reality, but in terms of physical matter or material, if you were to, for instance, ingest the bark or a tincture made from the bark of the Peruvian bark or the cinchona or China tree, you would find that it would elicit symptoms in you, high fever and chills and all kinds of aches and things that mimic various things like malaria, for instance. So if we are to take that tincture made from the bark of that tree and convert it into a homeopathic form via serial dilution and succussion, shaking it vigorously each step of dilution, you would end up with clearly a non-toxic dilution that wouldn't cause those symptoms. But the interesting thing that Dr. Samuel Hahnemann found in Germany in the late 1790s to the early 1800s, he found that he applied a re-ingester, if you would re-ingest that substance, you now could reverse the very same symptoms it had caused moments earlier. So like curing like. And then expanding on that, Lily, the idea of the law of similars, in that similar suffering could be addressed, homeopathy. That is, even if it weren't caused by the ingestion of that tincture, the symptoms that manifest in anybody that mimic the same kind of symptoms could be addressed by that remedy. So you have an expansion of like cures like to the law of similars, which is why, Rus toxicodendron, which is poison ivy, is a great remedy for poison ivy, obviously. But other things that happen, eczema, psoriasis, or stiffness of the joints, are often associated with exposure to that plant, can also be remedied by taking homeopathic Rus tox, even if you haven't been exposed to poison ivy. So that's the brief version of it. There are many other examples we could go to if you'd like.
So yeah, yeah. Well, I wanted, because in particular herbs, we are surrounded by herbs. I love basil and rosemary, and whenever I have a sore throat, I will suck on some garlic and it just takes those things away. These are home remedies. These are remedies that we can ourselves just take and see what the side effect is, which hopefully is a much a better health. So what are some of the herbs? Let's start with herbs in the home or in
Mhm.
our fields that we can look
Okay.
at, and what do they help with?
Well, I want to start with arnica, but I also want to start with something that's a companion to it, because it's probably more likely that you're growing it or can grow it wherever you are. It's called comfrey. Comfrey, and the homeopathic Latin name is Symphytum officinalis. And Symphytum or comfrey is a brilliant medicinal plant herb that can be used topically and internally. And it grows very well in most parts of North America. And you have these giant leaves that have little prickly things on them, but it's not like a thistle or anything. But, if you handle them with gloves, it might be easier when you're harvesting or processing. But these giant leaves could be dried. You can soak them into a tincture, utilize the tincture as a super nutrient rich, dense food, in fact. But most people will take that tincture or make it into a poultice, the actual leaves themselves, over an injury, particularly a fracture or a bone break. And it accelerates the recovery of that fracture remarkably. Like if you were to go to a doctor to have your bone set, or a fracture that was there that didn't require much, and you began to use this as a poultice, this comfrey, uh, you would see such an accelerated rate of recovery. Doctors are astounded. They're like, what are you doing? It normally takes 8 weeks. You're doing it in 4 or 3. So I've seen rapid recoveries generated by the use of comfrey as an herbal tincture that you can grow easily in your backyard, or even, I guess, indoors technically if you want to, but it's a very large leafy plant. So it'd be better outdoors.
Well, when you talk about tinctures, it's like, okay, well that sounds kind of difficult to do. Is
Mhm.
it difficult to just create that tincture?
Oh, not at all. I mean, if you dried the comfrey plant, crumble it into little bits and just soaked it in water or water and alcohol, even overnight, you'll have a potent topical agent. And again, you can take that liquid and you can use it as a supplement in terms of a nutrient-rich superfood internally. So it's not difficult to do. And certainly there are many books that can give more detail, if you want to go further in that. I mean, there are certain things like, if we transition to the arnica plant, which is known as the leopard's bane, that's also a North American herb plant that's been used for hundreds of years. Tracking back even to the Old West movies with John Wayne, he mentioned arnica in at least one of those movies. You recognize that this is one I wish everybody knew about because arnica can grow easily. You can harvest it, but arnica is what we call slightly toxic for ingestion. So I don't recommend. It's like if you convert it into a tincture, which you can, not to ingest it necessarily, but to use it topically on areas of wounds, unbroken skin typically, bruising, contusions, blunt force traumas. And it immediately reduces the inflammation, the swelling, the pain, the discomfort, and accelerates the tissue regrowth or recovery.
Mm.
If you were to take arnica internally, I recommend that as a homeopathic. That's where we would take that initial tincture, if you will, or mother substance, convert it through a serial dilution and succussion process so you can safely ingest. Now, I'm not saying arnica is toxic like mercury. It's not, but
No.
it's not something you typically ingest as an herbal tincture. You use it more often topically, and it can be combined into an ointment, whether you do your own, make it with coconut oil or various, even petrolatum, which is petroleum, but we are kind of wrongly under the impression that all petroleum is bad because it's oil, but it's a natural substance from the earth, and you can use petrolatum that is more or less cleansed of impurities, and then you can, cook things into it, heat things into it. So that's another thing, along with coconut oil and olive oil, different things. So there are various ways you can make these things for topical use, or just leave them in the tincture form, or again, convert them into homeopathy. And arnica will work with shock, swelling, bruising, injury, any type of trauma, including emotional traumas that people will think to use the Bach rescue remedy for. Arnica can also be helpful there as well.
Interesting. So when I think of arnica, I don't think of it as a plant. I don't think of it as something. I mean, I have topical ointments that I use,
Mhm.
but when I think of arnica, I think of the little pellets that I put under my tongue.
Homeopathic, yes.
Yeah, the homeopathic pellets. So when I'm
Mhm.
thinking of homeopathy, I'm thinking, okay, uh, what are some of the better brands to trust? What are some of the brands that you trust when it comes to that?
Well, the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of the United States is HPUS. It's the recipe for the manufacturing of homeopathic ingredients.
Mhm.
And that has to be, in order to sell it on the market, you have to make it exactly that way. So
Interesting.
it's in, yeah. So in terms of homeopathic manufacture, if it's labeled as a homeopathic, it's got the NDC number, National Drug Code number, it's made the same way. Now, what would be different is if a company decided to make a complex of a number of remedies altogether. That would be more or less from either a theoretical book knowledge of the materia medica, or ideally a clinical practice, finding somebody who's been in practice for years that has formulated based on success beyond theory, right? And so that's where you have distinctions between homeopathic manufacturers. But the way you make the ingredients into a homeopathic, all the same.
Well, that's probably more of a regulation than supplements.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? They try to say, homeopathy is not regulated. It is. It's fact. It's treated as a drug. The difference being that you don't have to go through what we call clinical drug trials that cost $500 million, and
Yeah.
then you have a patent protection to sell it for X number of years for exorbitant profits.
Hmm.
You can't patent that, so you don't have the back end benefit of, oh, I can sell this exclusively and I can profit. No one else can.
Hmm.
But the regulations for the use and sale of homeopathy rely on the various authoritative texts known as Materias Medica or Materia Medica that give indications for use. So labeling has to at least conform to the various Materia Medica that are out there for indication. So you have to sell them with indication for use. Unlike the herbs, for instance, you have to kind of skirt around issues and make various vague, often structure function statements like, good for skeletal health or good for circulatory health, but you can't make a claim for remediating a disease. That would be a
Hmm.
drug claim. The irony is that despite the safety of these products, they are regulated as drugs since the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938 grandfathered the homeopathic pharmacopoeia in, thanks to the work of Dr. Copeland, who was a physician from Michigan initially and a senator, and he was a homeopath and an allopath, and he
Wow.
almost single-handedly saved the pharmacopoeia from eradication when the drug industry began to dominate the 20th century and wanted to eliminate competition. So there's still a bias against homeopathic remedies within our FDA, yet there's still a legal basis for which they are on the market.
So in order for it to be homeopathic, and this is what I understood, it would be 1/10 of the dose, or is that for cancer treatment only? Because I know that with Dr. James Forsyth, he's a homeopathic oncologist,
Mhm.
and so he always does. If the person can handle that particular kind of chemo, he will
Mhm.
use 1/10 of the dose that most people get as a regular dose. So
Well,
is that true for all?
it sounds like he's microdosing chemotherapy. I don't know if he's converting it into an actual homeopathic form or not, but the dilutions are only one part of the manufacturing of a homeopathic medicine. The succussion between each step of dilution, you mentioned a 1 to 10 ratio, which is
Mhm.
like, a dilution level or ratio. And if you did that once and shook it up, you have a 1x. If you did that 10 times, you would have a 10x, and that would be equivalent to 1 part per 10 billion of the initial substance. Obviously not toxic for most things, but arguably from an allopathic materialistic reductionist standpoint, they just say, well, that's a diluted whatever that was to begin with. It won't do anything because they rely on quantity. Now, this doctor you're mentioning probably recognizes toxicity more than most oncologists and says, I don't want to poison people if I don't have to.
No.
And working with a microdosing concept, which you could say it borrows a little bit from homeopathy because less becomes more. You're utilizing dilutions, but it's more than just diluting, it's also succussion. And
Mhm.
that energizes or alters the interactivity with the water itself or the pellets that you use to communicate something beyond
Mhm.
just this is a diluted substance.
Now, did you say that if you shake it once, it's 1/10? If you shake it more than that, it becomes more diluted? Is that what it is, or
Typically,
less
you
diluted?
Yeah, the succussion or dynamization process is dilution and succussion. So let's say you take the original mother substance and you dilute it at, 1 to 10 ratio, whatever
Mhm.
quantity you use, then you would shake it 100 times.
100
That would
times.
be your first, homeopathic dilution or attenuation, 1x. Then you would repeat the same ratio, the 10 to 1x, it becomes a 2x. But again, it's the shaking 100 times between each step, not just dilution. Repeat that dose, dilution again to the next step, shake it 100 times. Now you have a 3x. And so you can go up beyond the number of Avogadro, which is the scientific acknowledgement of the point when they say there are no molecules left of the original substance. But now we know with technology, we have nanoparticles that exist beyond the Avogadro's number as well. Whether it's relying on nanoparticles or the energetics that are left over in communication with the water and the hydrogen bonds. Again, these are all things that haven't been fully vetted and determined why and how it works. A lot of theories, but we know that it does work. There have been double-blind placebo-controlled studies. In fact, the concept of placebo-controlled studies comes from homeopathy, not allopathic medicine, and the
Interesting.
concept of a placebo comes from homeopathy. So whether it's a placebo or not, can be argued, the reality is, wouldn't you get well if with a placebo? Why would you complain?
That's right.
It's not toxic like the drugs. So
Well, the mind is very powerful. And if you do get healthier, and it is a placebo, then that's good enough. I
mm,
don't care what you want
yeah,
to call it. That's all
I
you
don't either.
needed. And yeah,
Exactly.
it's crazy. And it's just like saying conspiracy theorists, and that just dismisses that person. And when they're saying placebo, that just dismisses the whole situation. And we
Yeah.
need to know that there's more to look into. We need to be curious about some of these things that are meant, some of these words that are meant to dismiss the value of whatever we're looking at. So we need to be
Yeah.
curious instead of critical. So that's a great reminder, Robert. Okay, so when you are looking around your home, let's say, I mean, because right there, that would disqualify me. I do have herbs around my home, but I've
Mhm.
never made a tincture. I've never done that.
Mhm.
So there is the principle of that. You
Mhm.
said you can take alcohol, you could take water and soak it, but at
Mhm.
what point do you know what your dosing is if you're not a
Sure.
commercial facility?
Yeah, I mean this gets to the issue of standardization versus the essence of the energy of the plant, which is a concept that again biochemistry and molecular reductionism doesn't take into consideration. So if you're making your own, like for instance in my greenhouse we have calendula. Most people have heard of calendula, but maybe they haven't used it. It's a wonderful herb that you can convert into a tincture or an ointment for topical care, skin care, wound care, recovery. It's a very calming plant as well, and you can take the flowers, right before they open, or early on, and you can soak them in water, or you can convert them into a tincture as well. Now, you don't have standardization in that sense when you're making your own, but how did we ever learn about the plants, the benefits of herbs long before there was this concept of standardization? Because we all made our own. And so it widely varied depending upon the soil content and everything, but yet it had a similar benefit across the spectrum because the plant was designed to do certain things. And this is a question, if people have a problem with it, ask God. Why is calendula this? Why is arnica that? Now, if we get down into the details of the chemistry of each plant, we will find wide varieties, much like bee pollen, which is a wonderful medicinal and nutritional substance, will vary widely depending on the presence of things or the absence of things in the soil around where these flowers are grown, where the bees collect and that kind of thing. But it's still a beneficial substance, for instance. So yeah, the standardization is not part of the equation in terms of your home making. But it's not as concerning because we know the essence of the plant across the board. And most of these plants, again, are non-toxic. Calendula is a very safe plant to ingest, much less to utilize topically. As I mentioned, arnica has some level of toxicity, so we don't test it. We got to learn about these things, but it's not devastatingly toxic like some things. But there's so many books on these things that many people have overblown the toxicity of some of these plants because it becomes a liability issue. So you want to go, don't take it. But you'll look historically with the herbalists that have passed the generations of knowledge and information, and they were doing things with these things that people would be shocked to learn about today. But I recognize the sensitivity we have in communicating this. We don't want people to just start drinking gallons of something and then end up saying, hey, you told me I could do that. So, we're dealing with a lot of people that are not really thinking clearly.
Yeah, but like you said, there are a lot of books out there. There's a lot of, I mean, you can just search on the internet and you can find different ways that you can dilute something or create a tincture. And I've never,
Mhm.
the only thing that I've ever done is to create some products like I'll use essential oils and I'll mix it with water and alcohol to create a healthy spray in the house, if we want to,
Mhm.
change the scent. But that's as far as my creativity skills will go. I would love to create my own tinctures. And one of the reasons why is there are certain things that I will use and I will do. It is not a tincture, it's not homeopathic. But for example, if I get a sore throat, I will cut a tiny little piece of garlic. I'll put it in my mouth. I'll suck it for as long as it's in my mouth and it gets soft. I'll chew it and I'll swallow it. The next day, I have no sore throat. And
Mhm.
it's almost that has that antibiotic. It has so let's talk about, would you be able to take something like that with garlic? Are there tinctures with garlic that could help
Sure.
for viral infections? What would you recommend?
Well, yeah, garlic is a high sulfur containing compound, very sulfur rich, and also the stabilized compound that's mostly antimicrobial is the allicin, and it's a very potent antimicrobial, very safe for utilization to neutralize infectious agents when you have it. And of course, by taking it raw that way, and some people can't, it's too potent for some, believe it or not. Much like oregano is pretty potent as well as another herb you can grow and make into a medicine for you. But the garlic can be definitely whole cloves or cut in half, put into various water alcohol combinations to bring out some of the essence for utilization. There is potential for being a growth medium for mold and other things. As any plant can decay, it can convert. We talk about the nature, how nature breaks things down. But when you have it in a higher alcohol content, or you could utilize things like silver or copper if you want to get into that as a preservative agent as well, and that could retard the growth if you don't want to use alcohol. But alcohol is a perfectly fine and safe use for a preserving agent and a storative agent. And alcohol is produced during the Krebs cycle of digestion. So it's a normal metabolite in the body. I'm not saying we should drink as much alcohol as we want, but in a tincture format or a homeopathic preservative, it really isn't going to contribute negatively to liver function because we're using fractional quantities, minimal quantities versus the amount that people might be drinking in terms of wine, beer, or spirits. But alcohol has been given a bad name because people abuse it, but it can be a helpful preservative agent in those cases to prevent aberrant growth in something like a tincture you're making with garlic or other things.
So oregano is a wonderful item that I have in my medicine cabinet and my toolkit. Now, is
Mhm.
that oregano considered homeopathic, or is that a full blown? How do I know which one is the difference between, is it homeopathic or not?
Well, if you're buying it, it will be labeled as a homeopathic or not. If it's not, it's violative of the regulations and law. It would be a problem for the company to do that. So most of the oregano products you see on the market are herbal tinctures, herbal presentations. So they're not homeopathics, although oregano can be used as a homeopathic as well. But in the case of an oregano product, it's typically a tincture of the oregano, the essential oil, or the oils that are brought out and preserved in an alcohol base or other things. But oregano can serve almost as its own preservative agent too. It's pretty potent as an antimicrobial. It's pretty harsh. You want to be careful putting it into very sensitive places like, I wouldn't put it right in the eye. It would be, very, very harsh and corrosive, if you will. Whereas we can utilize silver or, the colloidal or hydrocells of silver, and they have some similar properties, but silver is much more gentle in terms of safe for putting in sensitive areas where oregano could be very stinging, burning, and maybe cause a little bit of caustic damage to tissue, even though it's not a harmful ingredient for the most part. It's just so potent. So you got to be careful in how you use it or where you use it.
So what are other things? So if I wanted to create like a toolkit for my health and in my home, what are some of the herbs and other things that like cures like that we would want to have in that homeopathic toolkit?
Well, yeah, herbal to homeopathic, again, there's some crossover, but as far as the spirit of our discussion, let's start herbal and let's give everybody probably a number one or 1A, along with some
Okay.
of the things we discussed,
Okay.
is dandelion. Taraxacum is the Latin name for dandelion. And of course, we've invested billions of dollars in killing dandelions on our lawns, and yet they're a detoxification plant. They cleanse the soil, they help heal a lot of things. And if we were to have dandelion, we could utilize this. It's a bitter, but it can be used as on our salads. We can cut up the leaves and eat them in raw in salads. We can macerate them and juice them. We can dry them and make them into teas. And these things are going to be supportive of both liver and kidney health primarily because it's a tonic for the liver and the kidneys. So if you want to help heal almost anything, we've got to start with liver and kidneys. And that plant is one of the greatest gifts from God. Yet why is it that an industry is dedicated to destroying it? Other than, if we get into the nefarious schemes of, hey, if people will poison their lawns and not get the dandelion and use it for poisoning their bodies, then we have an ability to treat them with diseases with more toxic poisons. So dandelion is utilized in its mother substance form. It's used raw and we made it as eaten, but it can be converted into a homeopathic remedy. You can use a very low potency, like a 1x, 2x, 3x. It's kind of between herbs and homeopathy, or you can use it at a full 10x, and it's going to help liver and kidneys for detox and other things.
So okay, so 1 to 10x, 1 to 10, when you said 1x, 2x, 3x, what would be the strongest potency? The
Well, in
1x?
homeopathy, the higher the number, the considered the higher the potency, but it's counterintuitive because there's less of the original
That's
substance,
what I thought you said.
right?
So,
Yeah.
okay. So how
So
does,
if we're looking at it energetically, bioenergetically, it seems to have more potency the more dilute it becomes via the succussion. Remember, it's not just dilution, but the shaking. It imparts energy, and that communication becomes more powerful. But it doesn't mean that a 3x is not helpful. Being a lower potency, there's more substance, and it's operating a little bit between both worlds because you have the herbal essence still, and you have some of the homeopathic essence. So it can be very supportive as a therapy, even if you're not going in full on into homeopathic forms of it.
Mhm.
And you could, take the tincture that you make at home. It won't be sold on the market as a homeopathic, but you're making it for yourself, and you have the best of both worlds. You can do that by serial dilution and succussion at home, even.
Okay. Okay. So what's the next tool that you would put in your kit?
Let's see, what else can you grow and make and utilize? I mentioned the thistles, right? Milk thistle is a very powerful herb for the liver. You can, squeeze it out. You'll see this white milky fluid come out. But people are a little nervous about the thistles because they can create irritation and other things. But yet, it's a very safe and powerful and potent liver support remedy as an herb. And of course, we can take that and convert that as well into the homeopathic realm. So anytime we're focused on liver health, we're going to be better off for it. Another thing I would say you can grow, it grows almost anywhere underground, is beets. Mentioned beets as a very powerful tool for the liver.
Mhm.
You can juice beets, you can cook them, you can eat them raw, you can pulverize them and dry them into a powder and add them into your superfood smoothies. It facilitates nitric oxide production, but it's again a great liver support herb or plant or food.
Mhm.
So that's another thing I would throw out there for consideration.
So would you use dandelion? Because you said that was also good for the liver detox.
Yeah.
Would you use both dandelion and milk thistle at the same time, or you would use one or the other?
Well, you can. I mean, this is what, herbal practices have blended these things for benefit. And you can look on labels where, you have an herbal liver support or detox support remedy. You'll begin to see and recognize from what we're discussing here, various thistles, that, the dandelion may be present, things, and even more things we will have time to discuss, where
Mhm.
they do a blend because it has this great synergistic benefit comprehensively to the liver. We won't have time to get into Ayurvedic medicine, but they have a lot of plants in Ayurveda that they'll blend in for liver and kidney for detoxification as well. So
Mhm.
there's a wonderful, powerful, if we can call it medicine from the herbal kingdom, from various let's say lineages or traditions around the world that we in America don't know much of unless we go out of our way to learn about it.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so what next? Because you just talked about the liver.
Mm,
Just recently was talking to someone I care about very much that I know that they are putting things into their lungs that are not optimal.
mhm.
And so they said that they were doing a
Yeah.
lung detox. What do you recommend for a lung detox?
Lobelia, the number one herb. It's got God's medicine for the lungs. Lobelia tincture is an incredibly powerful
I have
substance.
that
You have it
here.
right there. Look at you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, lobelia often will use like a vinegar basis. Some can be alcohol too, and it's just a profound tool for healing the lung tissue, whether it be COPD, whether it be bronchitis, long-standing issues with lung damage from smoking, other things. It is, and I'm not saying lobelia is only that, but boy, if we just utilize it there, we could supersede almost any medicine that they give for the lungs. Uh, you would take that tincture typically when you're starting, because lobelia can elicit a little bit of nausea and discomfort feelings because it's somewhat of a, you got to get used to it because it really alters function for you in a good way. So you could take like a dropper full in a big glass of water and sip on the water throughout every morning as a medicinal start. And then as you feel stronger about it, you can put even more in it if you really got to overcome a lot of lung issues. And I talk about in Unlock the Power to Heal, the book I wrote with Ty Bollinger, a lung, the good loving for your lungs, I call that chapter. And I talk about lobelia, and I talk about various homeopathic remedies that are adjuncts to lobelia, like antimonium tartaricum, Drosera rotundifolia, Spongia tosta, and Bryonia alba. Bryonia, interesting enough, is wild hops. You think of hops making beer, but this comprehensive plant is also, as a homeopathic, wonderful for the liver and a lot of other systems. So those can be complementary to the use of lobelia tincture, as well as nebulizing the bioactive silver hydrosol, like the sovereign silver for lungs. We can just eliminate so much of the lung disasters that we have out there with a number of the things I've just mentioned in the last minute or so.
Yeah. Can you nebulize Argentin 23?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've done that
Okay.
in our family for years. Now we have the bioactive copper hydrosol as well, the sovereign copper, and copper plays a huge role in inflammation reduction and countering fungal and yeast and mold toxicity. A lot of people with the lungs have mold issues. The copper can also be nebulized as well.
You know what I've been nebulizing lately, because of Dr. Thomas Levy, he's a regular in the classroom. It's hydrogen peroxide. And
Mhm.
that has been very helpful to me when it comes to like if I, we can't escape this conversation without talking about the virus and the people that are being contaminated by each other, and the fear that's happening in the world
Yeah.
because of the fear of the germ theory as opposed to the terrain theory. And so I know that whenever the first sign that I'm feeling a little run down, or and I had mentioned to you that I'm really focusing on eliminating stress in my life, and I really do want to embrace more of balance into my life. That when I started, when I start thinking about somebody that has, stood in front of me and I'm a little run down, I know that I'm going to be more susceptible. So I'll start with the garlic and I'll
Yeah.
do the nebulizer of the hydrogen peroxide. Have you ever done hydrogen peroxide? It's a little stingy.
Yeah, I haven't done it as a nebulizer, but I've utilized it medicinally for other things. But yeah, it's very complementary to the silver because the oxygen silver relationship is profound. So you can reactivate silver and get more bang for your buck in terms
Yeah,
of utilizing one than the other.
yeah.
But again, to know what you know, Lily, and what we know, the use of other things like ventilators that we've heard about
No,
uh, would be almost unheard of because we would never have that issue. Now,
right.
another aspect of the lung issues we are convinced is part of the whole COVID dialogue happens to be oxygen, blood oxygen carrying transport, and that's a copper issue because people have been taking so much zinc and vitamin C through COVID. And in nature, zinc always comes with copper. In nature, C always comes with copper. And if we isolate them and supplement, we're going to deplete copper stores that are already diminished because people don't eat copper rich foods. They don't have good digestion to absorb whatever copper they encounter. And so we're depleting that, which is so critical for the utilization, absorption, uptake, and metabolism of iron, which is the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, without which, without copper, iron only becomes an oxidative damager, a rusting agent in the body. So utilizing the sovereign copper has become a very critical part of when we talk lung health, oxygenation, blood coagulation issues, all of these things. Copper is unfortunately overlooked and wrongly maligned as a toxic metal where it is so critical for so many functions.
So I had I don't know if it was 2 grams or 2 micrograms that I was taking because I was taking a lot of zinc. I had increased my
Probably
zinc.
2 milligrams.
Okay, so it's 2 milligrams. And I did a show, and they were like, no, don't even take it. Don't even take the copper because you don't need it. Your body can produce enough. So what do you say to that?
I'm just embarrassed for whoever told you that. I mean, copper is so critical for numerous what they call cuproenzyme pathways. Cuprum is copper, and we can't, as I mentioned, blood oxygenation and transport. We can't have proper coagulation. We can't produce ATP at the cellular level without copper working with magnesium. We can't protect our heart, our cardiac, our proteins, if you will, much less our arteries and our veins without copper working with selenium. And copper is critical for all connective tissues, skin, hair, and nails. If you don't want premature graying of the hair, we need copper. If you want protection from excessive UV radiation exposure, because we want sunlight and we want to be out there as long as we can without damage, copper extends the length of time we can withstand that healthful sun exposure for vitamin D production. And this is just, a little bit of what copper does. So for someone to be talking about copper like that, they have been probably reading a lot of medical journals without context.
Yeah, and it was Dr. Lee Cowden who told me to start taking a copper,
Of
and
course,
then
Dr. Lee Cowden knows where he's the smartest guy out there. So
I
yeah,
know I need to get him back into the classroom. But
yeah.
yeah, we did a mold, we did an M cube detox. That's mold, microbes, and metals.
Mhm,
We did a detox for 12 weeks together, and we had so much fun. And
mhm.
so that, but by the way, let me just take a little moment because I do want to talk about my website and some of the things that course that we did with Dr. Lee Cowden. It's called the MQ Detox Experience. If you go to my whenyouneedafriend.com. And by the way, while you're there, please subscribe, like, and follow me on all social media. When you go to and search everything that we've done, we have a lot of courses that we've done with Dr. Lee Cowden, Dr. Thomas Levy, and Dr. Dr. All these wonderful people. You can find it at whenyouneedafriend.com. So you take your health back, start taking action. So while you're at whenyouneedafriend.com, check out also the event that we're doing on April 6th, 2024 in Rockledge, Florida. It's called I Am the Solution. I Am the Solution Natural Health Summit. And we're going to have incredible speakers and wonderful vendors that will teach you that you do not need to take a pill. You just need to take responsibility. As I say, you can take a pill, you can take responsibility, which is my registered service mark. I want all of us to know that that pill has ramifications. That pill gives us permission to do whatever it is that we want. Eat unhealthy, drink unhealthy, and then when something wrong happens to us, then we are shocked. We're shocked that our body broke down. So check out it's going to pop up when you go to whenyouneedafriend.com. Enter Lily001 and get $20 off for the year 2024 for this summit. So make sure that you get your seat, your front row seat. We have VIP tickets as well as regular admission. So I hope to see you all at the summit. Then we also have the Shop Now bag. These are all Lily approved. From pain management all the way to beauty products, head to toe, that you can do, and it doesn't hurt or harm your body. So check out the Shop Now bag. And then last but not least, you can become an enrolled student in the classroom, whether it's $1 or $1,000 a month, or it's a one-time donation of whatever it is that you can give. And for those of you, when I say $1, I really mean it. And for those of you who have been sharing $1, I love you all just as much as the larger donors, because we're giving from place of substance and or that where it hurts. And so I really do appreciate the support and the love that I'm getting from all of you. So whatever it is that you can donate, please do so. Just sharing this video with your friends is being a part of the growth of the Lily McDermott Radio Show classroom, because when the algorithms get so much interaction, the algorithms cannot shut us down. So let's be smart about this. We are part of the 99%. So let's take care of making sure this information gets out there. Just yesterday, I did a class with Professor Thomas Seyfried, and we need to do that. We need to get that information out there so that so that you can make a decision based on true information. So today we have Robert Scott Bell, who I've known for a long time. It seems that we haven't seen or texted each other in a while. So I thought, let's get him on. Let's find out what he's doing. And so I know that your website is robertscottbell.com, and you have your own show 5 days a week, right?
5 days a week live, and on Sundays we do what we call Sunday Conversations, which has been an evolution last year, and getting kind of down, if you will, on a couch conversation in a sense, and really finding out why people believe what they believe, their spiritual journey as well. It's very non-judgmental. It's really just we're open to learning, and I think we're better off when we find out, rather than judging people about what they believe, what is their journey. You learn about them and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm enriched by learning about them. You don't
Yes,
have to
that's
believe what
right.
they believe, but
That's
it's
right.
been an extraordinary addition to what we do with health and healing live 5 days a week as well.
Now, can they find you at Robert Scott Bell and know where to register to listen to your show?
Yeah, robertscottbell.com. You can watch it live on the website. Various platforms carry it live, and others, in the podcast form later. You can text RSB, my initials, to 66866. If you text RSB to 66866, 66866, you'll be prompted to enter your email address. That way, you'll be part of the newsletter, which we don't sell your information at all. It's just about us communicating with you and bringing you good information, just like you do, Lily, to empower you, to
Yeah.
bring, healing for you or a loved one. There's a lot of information out there. It can be confusing. I tend to try to make it as simple as possible so that anybody, you don't have to be a doctor. In fact, it's easier if you're not. You don't have to unlearn a lot of garbage to be able to care for yourself, kind of like the things we're talking about today.
Mhm.
Bring it down to a level where, oh, I can do that. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can. And our ancestors all did. So it's
Yeah.
time to just get back to the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, with you had mentioned COVID, and long COVID is happening. What are some of the tinctures or homeopathic remedies that we could use for clearing our lungs and clearing other things in our body?
Well, I already mentioned copper. I think that was a great addition to the
Yeah.
silver. That is largely broad spectrum. and its benefit, whether you perceive that these are contributing factors or causative agents, bacterial, fungal, or viral, and even parasitic. Copper is a really potent antiparasitic. So, in addition to all the enzyme pathways it supports, it can also be helpful to reduce that burden. So, between silver and copper, those are profound. I always have been an advocate for selenium because without selenium, you have cellular dysregulation. Then you have viral activity, and I know there's a great controversy about whether viruses are causative agents or whether they're detox and communication pathways, or even for some, whether they exist or not. But the original term virus is poison or toxin. So, in that regard, selenium plays a vital role in keeping the cells in integrity and detoxifying them as well. There are various herbs. Interesting, if you've interviewed Dr. Brian Artis, he's talked extensively about the utilization but tobacco, or
Yeah.
particularly one ingredient from tobacco, which has been vilified, nicotine, which
Hmm.
turns out was not an addictive substance, is not an addictive substance, and isn't harmful. In fact, a very necessary part of a healthful diet to have substances that contain nicotine, including certain vegetables like eggplant, second to tobacco in nicotine. And we have
Yeah.
nicotinic receptors all over the body. But what they've done with tobacco and commercial tobacco farming, of course, is poisoning it through chemical pesticide use. And then when they harvest the tobacco, they add hundreds of toxic chemicals and addictive chemicals that are not native or natural to the plant. I'm not advocating smoking, but I would
Right.
look at that tobacco plant as something to ingest or utilize also as a tincture, topically or otherwise, and as a great nutrient. And it has B vitamins as well, a great tool. So that can be done. Also, homeopathic tobacco or nicotinum, which is the isolate in a homeopathic form, can be helpful to push out some of the what they call the snake venom peptides that seem to be part and parcel to whatever they're engineering into the plasmids
Hmm.
that create all kinds of injury, damage, and alteration to DNA itself. So those are some things I throw out there for your consideration. And we're going to be doing a long COVID recovery summit that I'm hosting and coming up, I think in June, we'll be releasing that. But stay in touch with robertscottbell.com and we'll get you plugged in with a lot of the docs. And there's not a singular, everybody agrees on this.
No.
But as we're all discovering and learning, I think it's important to be aware of all the various viewpoints, theories, and also clinical practices that are resulting in good outcomes, even if we don't fully understand why. I want to share those with everybody, similar to what we saw in the midst of the COVID craziness, where you had many doctors that were using old drugs like hydroxychloroquine with great success, or a newer drug like ivermectin with great success, yet they were vilified by so many in the media
Mhm.
and government, etc. And I'm not saying that I necessarily had to rely on those things, but hey, if you were getting good success, why would I say, hey, you shouldn't have access to the knowledge or access to utilize them? There may be herbal and homeopathic additions that we'll be able to share as well to get people past not only the acute phases of these things, but now what's lingering, like the long-term chronicities that have developed even beyond the chronicities we existed in before that.
Yeah. We've talked about the clotting situation that is happening, and Dr. Thomas Levy had suggested that everybody do a D-dimer test. I don't know if you're familiar with a
Yeah,
D-dimer.
yeah.
And so I went out and I had a D-dimer test, and I was talking to a really dear friend who just lost a healthy, vibrant friend, a lifetime friend that died. They believe it was a blood clot.
Mhm.
And there was, I don't know if, I'm not going to talk into about the shot. I'm not going to be talking anything about that. But I will say that I had a conversation with her and I said, can you please go get a D-dimer test and just to see where
Yeah,
you're at, because I do know some things that they have done, which would be could make her or him susceptible to clotting. And so is there anything homeopathically that we could
yeah.
do that will help kind of remove these clots that are happening?
Yeah. Well, the irony of that in the D-dimer test, et cetera, is also shows evidence of snake venom peptide, interactivity, venom envenomation.
Mhm.
And what I was using as a homeopath during the time of COVID, and many homeopaths we would talk about this, were the snake venom remedies and homeopathics. And that would include lachesis, vipera, There's, oh gosh, you name the snake and a venom, there's a homeopathic equivalent for it. And uh, this was
And
before
I don't recommend a tincture made from this.
no,
You might
no,
want to
no.
buy it.
These are homeopathic remedies, so they're
But
safe.
you don't want to make it. You don't want to be
Yeah,
wrestling a
unless you,
snake
yeah,
and getting that venom. Okay, go
if you're
ahead.
milking your own snakes, I mean, and snake venoms are not water soluble. They're typically, you have to dry them and triturate them in a powder before you can convert them to homeopathic form for safe ingestion. But the snake venoms we were using, even before Dr. Brian Artis brought out this awareness of, my gosh, there could be these snake venom peptides that are part and parcel to the, the COVID injections and all of these things. And it was great controversy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I said, to Dr. Artis, I said, look, whether you're right or wrong on it initially, and I think he's right on it, but whether it didn't matter to us as homeopaths, because remember, like we started our discussion, like cures like, and law of similars. You didn't have to be envenomated to get benefit by the homeopathic form of it, because it impacted those symptoms, whether it was caused by it or not.
Okay.
So we had the great, let's say, flexibility of going, I don't care whether it is or isn't, the remedies match symptoms. I mentioned copper as well, or cuprum metallicum, homeopathic. That plays a huge role in blood health as well, in normal coagulation issues. So that would be extraordinary. But again, the snake venom homeopathic remedies would be the things that I would look to in
Can you
those cases.
repeat that? You said lycogens,
I'm sorry?
vipera. What were the names that you used?
Some of the remedies: Vipera,
Vipera.
viper,
Mm-hmm.
lachesis,
Lachi,
Lachis, yeah,
Q-U-I-S?
Lachis, lachesis. You have, gosh, there are so many. Again, name the snake. We got the Bushmaster we have the crate snake. We have all of these remedies that you can look up and just say homeopathic snake venoms, and they'll come up. And
Wow.
you can investigate them further to see which one matches most closely to the symptoms you're aligned with. But so many of them have a negative impact on the blood. That's why they can be crossed over and used in combination or on their own. Some are more nervous system focused than others, right? Depending on the venom. But most of them do impact the blood. And that's why you can, kind of work through them safely as a homeopathic remedy without harm.
Very good. And so would that help with the clotting?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You'll see the
Okay.
indications for their use will be, clotting issues, and you'll see the remedy and go, oh, yeah, that I definitely need to apply here.
So have you experienced people that were diagnosed with clotting, that had these clots that they've been talking about,
Yeah.
and then were able to do the tinctures, the snake venom tinctures,
The homeopathics.
and
Yes. Yes.
homeopathic
Yeah.
tinctures, and were able to reverse the clotting? Have you known of
Yes.
anyone?
Yeah. Yes. And again, this has been known long before there was COVID and all the injections, that it can work on reversing, even if you had no access to the antivenoms, which are very expensive and hard to come by. And I'm not saying that there isn't a role for them and they aren't important if you get envenomated by a snake, but it's good to know that you have homeopathic options as well, so that, let's say if you live in an area of venomous snakes a lot, it would be good to have the remedies associated with it. Even if you were to go to a hospital and get the antivenoms, you would be in much better shape by the time you got there, by
Mm.
utilizing these homeopathic remedies as a response.
So recap, what are some of the, we have about 3 minutes left. What are some of the great things to have in our toolkit? Because would that be one of them, a snake venom?
Well, I think based on what's happened in terms of blood issues, big time,
Okay.
I would say that the copper hydrosol would be very important now, because we've diminished copper due to overuse of zinc and vitamin C, and we don't eat copper-rich foods, and even the copper-rich foods are not copper-rich.
Mhm.
We've talked about various things like dandelion, milk
Mhm.
thistle, mentioned calendula,
Mhm.
uh, symphytum, or the bone set or nip bone that's called comfrey,
Mhm.
arnica, leopard's bane, whether you grow it or buy it. I mean, that's, again, these are the basic things to have on hand. We didn't get into white willow bark,
Oh,
which is where they derived aspirin from. So rather than synthesizing, aspirin or buying aspirin, which can be damaging, you can use the tincture from the white willow bark, and maybe you have that tree in whatever. But you can easily access white willow as a remedy to have at home as well, instead of relying on steroidal and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs for headaches and things.
now, if I were to boil the white willow bark, because I have some bark as tea, and I were to make it into tea, that's not considered homeopathic?
No, it's still an herbal form.
It's a still
But
herbal.
yeah, you can convert that into homeopathic form, just like we've discussed, cereal dilution, succussion. Yeah.
Very good, very good. Well, this has been a great conversation. What would you want to leave if somebody were to just walk in? They're just like, stumbling on the premiere of the classroom here. And what would you want them to know about the importance of homeopathic remedies and therapies?
Well, partly I'd love for them to be able to realize that they can make it at home, even though it's not officially sanctioned by the pharmacopoeia. If you realize you can learn about that to have safe self-help, which we need, because we have the regulatory authorities like FDA very antagonistic to the existence of homeopathy because they're captured agencies by pharmaceutical firms. So I don't want to lose access to them, obviously, but I also want people to go back to their roots and the things we've discussed in herbalism, to rely on not so much having to buy it as much as we can make our own, and then we can, even in a grid down scenario, we could be of great benefit to our family, our friends, our community, and that's why I say grow food as well, not just herbs. But the ability to even make homeopathic remedies at home in a simple way, and may not be exactly the way the pharmacopoeia says it, but you'll still have the essence of that energetics, and you'll be empowered to care for yourself and become the medicine man or woman of your community, even in a little bit. And we all need to be that, because we've given up on our birthright in healing, and therefore we've turned it over to an elite class of rulers that poison us back to health, but the back to health part never happens.
Absolutely. That is true. We need to take our health back. And I love your suggestions, Robert. And it's so nice to see you and reconnect with you. And I'm looking forward to perhaps being in that Sunday conversation with you,
Yeah.
because it would be nice. I think that that's one of the things that's missing in today, which is that connection to God. It's that connection to a higher power that gives us purpose as well. And so when we get grounded in that, we can handle all things. Like I was saying, the I am the solution, the I am is the God in us. The God
Yes.
in us which can allow us to do great things. And so I want to thank you and the God in you that has allowed you to do great things. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing to create awareness and healing in the world.
Thank you, Lily. It's always great to connect with you.
Thank you. And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyounneedafriend.com. It's your choice. It's your choice in how you choose to heal. But make sure you have information that is real. Look at everything. This is Lillian McDermott and Robert Scott Bell wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good job.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert